A lone Apache warrior cradled his dying infant beneath a merciless desert moon, his wife's body still warm in the ground. Until a Mexican widow appeared at his Tipi entrance with grief-swollen breasts and milk meant for a child she would never hold again. The desert breathed fire even as the sun dropped below the Dragoon Mountains. Heat rose from the cracked earth in wavering sheets, distorting the horizon where saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels against a sky bleeding orange and purple. The air tasted of dust and creosote, of sage and something darker, the metallic tang of desperation that clung to everything in the hidden canyon where Nitro had made his camp. Vultures circled high above, their shadows crossing the red sandstone cliffs in lazy spirals, as if they already knew what the Apache warrior refused to accept. His teepee stood alone in the shadow of those cliffs, a solitary cone of buffalo hide and lodge poles that seemed to shrink against the vastness of the land. Smoke no longer rose from the opening at its peak. The fire had died hours ago, and Nitro lacked the strength or will to rebuild it. The entrance flap hung crooked, one tie broken, swaying slightly in the hot wind that swept down from the mountains, carrying the scent of pinon pine and distant rain that would never reach this forsaken place. Around the teepee, the evidence of his struggle lay scattered like battlefield debris, empty clay bowls crusted with dried milk, torn cloths stained yellow and brown, a wooden spoon he'd carved himself lying abandoned in the dust. Inside the dim shelter, he sat cross-legged on a worn blanket woven by his grandmother's hands, his muscular frame hunched forward, shoulders trembling with exhaustion. His long black hair hung loose and uncombed, streaked with dust and ash. His buckskin shirt, once decorated with intricate beadwork his wife had sewn during the long winter nights when her belly had been round with their child, was now stained with sweat and spotted with what might have been tears, or might have been the water he'd tried desperately to coax down his daughter's throat. In his arms, baby Shadi whimpered. The sound was weak, a thin mewling that barely carried beyond the circle of his embrace, nothing like the lusty cries she'd produced in her first weeks of life. Her tiny face was flushed red, her lips cracked and peeling like old leather left too long in the sun. Her small fists clenched and unclenched rhythmically, searching for something that wasn't there, something he couldn't give her, driven by an instinct older than language or thought. She was 4 months old, born in the spring, when the desert still remembered winter's mercy, when wildflowers painted the canyon floors in brilliant yellows and purples, when her mother's laughter had filled this very teepee with warmth and joy. Now summer had turned cruel, and the child who should have been growing plump and strong was instead wasting away, her ribs visible beneath skin that seemed too loose, too fragile, like a robe made for someone twice her size. "Shadi," Nitro whispered in Apache, his voice hoarse and breaking. "Shadi, Shaye, little mountain, please." He touched his daughter's cheek with one calloused finger, felt the heat radiating from her skin like stones that had baked all day in the sun. Fever. She'd had it for 2 days now, ever since his last attempt to feed her had failed. The cloth he'd soaked in water mixed with mashed mesquite beans, the precious goat milk he'd traded his best knife to obtain from a Mexican rancher 3 days' ride south past the border, none of it would stay down. She would gulp desperately, her small throat working frantically, and then her tiny body would convulse, rejecting everything, leaving her weaker than before. He tried again now, though he knew it was futile, reaching for the clay bowl beside him with his free hand. The goat milk inside had soured in the heat, turned thick and pungent, separated into curds and yellowish liquid that smelled of rot and failure. He knew it was no good, knew that feeding her spoiled milk would only make things worse, but desperation made fools of even the strongest warriors, stripped away wisdom, and left only the animal need to do something. Anything, rather than sit helpless while death crept closer. He dipped his finger in the liquid and brought it to Shadi's lips, watching as her mouth opened instinctively, rooting toward the moisture like a flower turning toward the sun. But the moment the sour milk touched her tongue, she turned her head violently and began to cry. Not the lusty wail of a healthy infant demanding attention, but a thin, rasping sound that cut through Nitro like an obsidian blade. "Sharp and cold and cruel, I know," he murmured, pulling her close to his bare chest, feeling her small heart racing against his own. "I know, little one. I know it's not what you need. I know I'm failing you." He rocked slowly, the motion automatic, learned in the 2 months since Ayasha had died. 2 months since childbirth fever had taken his wife, since her strong hands had gone limp in his, since her voice singing lullabies had faded to silence, since the light had left her eyes and he'd become both mother and father to this child. The medicine woman, old Dakea, had tried everything, burning sage and sweet grass, making poultices of yarrow and willow bark, chanting prayers to Usun, the giver of life, the creator who shaped the first Apache from clay and breath. But the fever had been too strong, the bleeding too much. Ayasha had held Shadi once more, kissed her daughter's forehead with lips already cooling, looked at Nitro with eyes full of love and terror and desperate apology. And then she was gone, her spirit fleeing her body like smoke rising from dying embers. The Apache buried their dead quickly in the old way, returned them to the earth before the sun completed its journey across the sky, before the spirit could become confused and linger in the world of the living. Nature had wrapped Ayasha in her finest deerskin dress, the one decorated with elk teeth and dyed porcupine quills traded from the Cheyenne, the one she'd worn when they married 3 summers ago beside the sacred spring. He'd placed her favorite turquoise stones in her hands, the ones her father had given her, and sung the death chant until his voice gave out and his throat bled. Then he'd sealed the burial place with heavy stones to keep the coyotes away and never spoke her name again, as was proper, as tradition demanded. To speak the names of the dead was to call their spirits back, to prevent them from completing their journey to the afterlife, to condemn them to wander forever between worlds. So she became the mother, the wife, the one who is gone, and her name became sacred silence. But tradition didn't fill an infant's belly. Tradition didn't replace a mother's milk. Tradition didn't stop a baby from starving. For the first month after Ayasha's death, Nitro had managed. Shadi had accepted the goat milk then, drunk it eagerly from cloths he'd dipped in the warm liquid, her small mouth working industriously, her eyes closing in contentment. She'd even seemed to thrive, her cheeks rounding, her grip growing stronger when she clutched his finger, her legs kicking with increasing vigor during the times when she was awake and alert. He'd allowed himself to hope, to believe that perhaps Usun had not completely abandoned him, that he could raise this child alone, that love and determination might be enough. He'd spent his days hunting rabbits and gathering mesquite pods, his nights singing to Shadi the same songs Ayasha had sung, rocking her in the cradle board his wife had made, pretending he knew what he was doing. Then 3 weeks ago everything changed. Shadi began refusing the goat milk. At first, he thought the animal had eaten bad grass, that the milk had turned bitter or toxic. He'd traveled again to the Mexican rancher, a hard-faced man named Gonzalez, who lived in a mud-brick house surrounded by thorny ocotillo fences, and traded his second-best knife for milk from a different goat. But Shadi refused that too, turning her head away, whimpering in frustration. He tried mare's milk, traded precious ammunition for it from a Comanchero trader passing through. She vomited it back within minutes, her small body heaving. He tried bone broth made from deer, water sweetened with the rare honey he'd found in a rock crevice, even his own blood mixed with water in desperation. Remembering old stories of warriors who'd kept wounded brothers alive with such measures, nothing worked. Nothing stayed down. And day by day, hour by hour, he watched his daughter fade. He'd ridden to the Apache camp 15 miles north, where the last of his people clustered in a hidden valley, trying to avoid the American soldiers who hunted them like animals, who killed the men and sent the women and children to reservations, where they died slowly of disease and broken hearts. He'd gone to every woman who might be nursing, every mother with an infant at her breast. There were only 3. The first woman, Nalin, wife of the warrior Cochilo, had twin boys of her own, both hungry, both demanding, both crying constantly because she barely produced enough for one, let alone two. She had no milk to spare, though her eyes had filled with pity when she saw Shadi's sunken cheeks. The second, an older woman named Guyen, whose daughter Ryes-Key had recently given birth, looked at him with such profound sadness that he knew the answer before she spoke. "My granddaughter produces barely enough for her own son," she said quietly, her weathered hands reaching out to touch Shadi's hot forehead. "The reservation food makes us weak. The white man's flour and rancid bacon. It's not the food our mothers ate. Our bodies forget how to nourish our children. I'm sorry, Naicho. I wish I could help." The third woman, young Nasha, had lost her baby 2 weeks prior to the coughing sickness that swept through the camp. Her milk had already dried up, her breasts bound tight with cloth to ease the pain of fullness that would never return, her eyes hollow with a grief that mirrored his own. Nicho had returned to his solitary camp with empty hands and a heart growing colder by the hour. He understood now what he faced. His daughter was starving, not from lack of trying, but from lack of what only a mother could provide. The milk of other animals wasn't enough. Her body rejected it, craved the specific nourishment that came from human breasts, warm and sweet and perfectly designed to sustain infant life. And her mother was dust and bones beneath desert stones. Beyond his reach, beyond his prayers, he'd even considered the unthinkable. Riding to the reservation at San Carlos, surrendering to the Indian agent there, begging the white man's government for help. He'd saddled his horse, a paint mare named Wind That Runs, and ridden halfway there before turning back. Because he knew what awaited on the reservation. Disease running rampant through crowded camps. Starvation as corrupt agents sold their food rations for profit. Children torn from their families and sent to schools back east, where they were beaten for speaking Apache, where their hair was cut short in shame, where their clothes were burned and replaced with stiff uniforms, where their spirits were systematically broken until they forgot who they were. Better to die free in the desert than live as a shadow of yourself behind wire fences and watchful guns. Better to let Shadi die in his arms under the open sky than watch her waste away in a place where the very air tasted of defeat. Now, as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared like distant fires in the gathering darkness, Nacho felt his resolve crumbling like sandstone under wind and rain. Shadi's whimpering had stopped. She lay against his chest, her breathing shallow and irregular, her small body limp as a rag doll. He pressed his ear to her ribcage and heard her heartbeat, fast and fluttering like a trapped bird, beating itself against cage bars. How much longer did she have? A day, hours? Would she see another sunrise? Usen, he whispered into the darkness, speaking to the Creator in the old tongue his grandfather had taught him. Usen, I have been a good man. I have honored the ways of my people. I've hunted cleanly, killed only what was needed, given thanks for every life taken. I have respected my elders, protected the weak, spoken truth even when lies would serve me better. I have fasted and prayed and sought visions. My wife was taken from me, and I accepted this as your will, though it broke me into pieces. But this child, this innocent one, who has done nothing but be born, who carries her mother's smile and her grandfather's courage, why must she suffer? Why must she die for my failures? If you must take a life, take mine. Let me join Ayasha in the spirit world. But please, please, by all the sacred mountains and the 4 directions, let someone save my daughter. Send me a sign. Send me hope. Send me anything but this slow death. The night gave no answer. The stars glittered cold and distant, as uncaring as they'd been since the first Apache looked up at them and wondered. The desert wind picked up, whistling through the canyon like the voices of ghosts, carrying with it the scent of rain that would never fall, of promises the sky would never keep. An owl called somewhere in the darkness, the sound that meant death was near. Nacho pulled a thin blanket over Shadi, tucked it around her carefully, and continued to rock. His eyes burned, but no tears came. He'd cried himself dry weeks ago. Now there was only the hollow ache, the knowledge that he was watching his daughter die by inches, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. He was a warrior, trained since boyhood to fight and hunt and survive, but all his strength and skill meant nothing against this enemy. He couldn't fight starvation with a knife. He couldn't hunt down a cure with bow and arrow. He could only hold his daughter and wait for the end. He must have dozed, exhaustion finally claiming him, despite his determination to stay awake, despite his fear that if he closed his eyes, Shadi would slip away while he slept. When his eyes snapped open, startled by some sound or instinct, the moon had risen full and bright, painting the interior of the tipi in shades of silver and shadow. Shadi still breathed against his chest, each small exhale a minor miracle, each tiny movement of her ribs a gift he didn't deserve. And then he heard it again, the sound that had woken him, footsteps outside, the soft crunch of boots on sand and gravel, careful and deliberate. Nacho's hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt, his fingers closing around the leather-wrapped handle, worn smooth by years of use. Soldiers. The cavalry had been pushing deeper into Apache territory, burning camps, killing anyone who resisted. Bandits. There were plenty of lawless men in this borderland who would kill an Apache for sport. Mexican raiders seeking revenge for some real or imagined slight. His muscles tensed, ready to fight, ready to protect his daughter with his last breath if necessary. The footsteps stopped just outside the teepee entrance. A shadow fell across the hide covering, a human shape backlit by moonlight, tall but slender, definitely not a soldier in uniform. Then came the knock, not on wood, for there was no door, but the soft sound of knuckles rapping against the taut buffalo hide that formed the teepee's wall. 3 times, deliberate, almost hesitant. The sound of someone who needed help, but feared being turned away. Hello? The voice was female, speaking in Spanish-accented English, the words careful and uncertain. Is someone there? Please, I need help. I've been walking for hours. I saw your fire earlier before the sun set, smoke rising from this canyon. Please, I mean no harm. I'm alone. I'm lost. Nacho said nothing. His grip tightened on the knife until his knuckles went white. White people lied. Mexicans lied. Everyone lied when it served them. He'd learned that lesson young, watching soldiers smile and offer gifts one day, then burn villages the next. But the voice didn't sound threatening. It sounded tired, desperate even, with an edge of fear that seemed genuine. And there was something else in it, a quality of grief that resonated with his own. I have a little food, the voice continued, and he could hear her shifting her weight from foot to foot. Dried meat and cornmeal, and water in my canteen. I can share. I just need to rest. Just for tonight. I won't bother you. I'll leave at first light. Please. The desert, it's so dark, and there are animals. Still Nacho hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. Then Shadi stirred against his chest and whimpered, the sound carrying clearly in the night air, cutting through the silence like a blade. Outside, the voice caught a sharp intake of breath. Is that a baby? The woman's voice changed completely, took on a note of urgency that bordered on anguish, on something raw and primal. You have a baby in there? Dios mío, that cry. Please, let me in. I can help. I swear on the Virgin Mary and all the saints. I can help. Please, that baby needs help. Something in those words, in the raw emotion behind them, in the way her voice broke on the word baby, made Nacho's hand relax on the knife. He didn't know why. Perhaps it was exhaustion clouding his judgment. Perhaps it was desperation making him foolish. Perhaps it was Hussein finally answering his prayer in the most unexpected way. Slowly, carefully, he rose with Shadi still cradled against him, her small body hot against his skin, and moved to the entrance. With his free hand, he pulled back the hide flap. Moonlight flooded in, silver and bright, and with it came the woman. She was Mexican, perhaps 25 years old, with long black hair braided down her back and skin the color of desert sand after rain. She wore a simple cotton dress, once white but now gray with travel, torn at the hem and stained with dust and what looked like old bloodstains. She carried a worn leather satchel over one shoulder, and her feet were wrapped in cloth strips because her shoes had fallen apart. Her face was gaunt, cheeks hollow, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, and something deeper, something that went beyond physical tiredness. A grief so profound it seemed to emanate from her like heat from stones left in the sun, visible in the set of her shoulders, in the way she held herself, in the haunted look in her dark eyes. But it was her chest that Nitro noticed most, that made his breath catch in his throat. The front of her dress was soaked, 2 dark circles spreading across the fabric over her breasts, wet and fresh and growing even as he watched. As he stared, another drop formed, soaking through the thin cotton, darkening the cloth further. Then another and another, an unstoppable flow. The woman followed his gaze, looked down at herself as if seeing the wetness for the first time, and her face crumpled like paper held too close to flame. Her hands flew to her chest, pressing against the wetness as if she could somehow stop it, hide it, deny its existence. And when she looked up again, tears streamed down her face, cutting clean tracks through the dust that coated her cheeks. 3 months ago, she whispered in broken English mixed with Spanish, her voice shaking, I gave birth to a son, mi hijo, my beautiful boy, my miracle. His name was Miguel after his grandfather. He had dark hair like mine and his father's smile. He lived for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of joy, of hope, of believing that maybe God had not completely forgotten me. Then the fever came in the night. I tried everything. Cold cloths, prayers, herbs the curandera gave me. Nothing worked. He died in my arms at dawn, and I buried him beside his father in the cemetery at Tubac. His father, who the federales killed last year because he spoke against the government, because he wanted justice for our people. She took a shuddering breath, her whole body trembling. Since then, my body doesn't understand. It thinks Miguel is still alive. It keeps making milk for a baby who will never drink again. Every day I bind my breasts with cloth until I can barely breathe. Every day the milk comes anyway. It soaks through everything. It hurts, Señor, Dios mío, it hurts so much. The pain, it's not just in my body. It's in my soul. She took a step forward, her eyes locked on Shadi, and Nitro saw something in her gaze that made his breath catch, that made his warrior's instincts fall silent. Not threat, not deception, not the look of someone who wanted to harm, but hunger of a different kind, a need as desperate as his daughter's, a void that ached to be filled, a mother's arms empty and yearning for weight they would never hold again. Your baby, Josefina Alvarez whispered, her voice breaking into pieces. She's starving. I can hear it in her cry, that weak sound that means she has no strength left. I can see it in how thin she is, how her skin hangs loose. I've seen it before in the village, babies who fade because their mothers have no milk. Please, please let me feed her. Let me give her what I have too much of, what my body makes for a child who is gone. Let me save one child, even if I couldn't save my own. Let me do something good with this pain, please. I'm begging you. Nitro stood frozen in the entrance of his tipi, Shadi burning with fever against his chest. This strange Mexican woman, with her grief-swollen breasts and desperate eyes, standing before him, like an answer to a prayer he'd barely dared to speak. The night held its breath. The desert waited, silent and vast. The stars looked down with their cold light, and in that moment, suspended between hope and despair, between pride and necessity, between death and the faintest possibility of life, between everything he'd been taught about trusting outsiders and the undeniable fact that his daughter was dying, Nacho made his choice. He stepped aside, widening the entrance, and gestured for her to enter. Come, he said in halting Spanish, one of the few words he knew. Come inside, and Josefina Alvarez, widow and wanderer, crossed the threshold into the tipi, into Nicho's life, into a bond neither of them could yet understand. Josefina stepped into the tipi with the hesitant grace of someone entering a sacred place, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior where moonlight filtered through the smoke hole above. The air inside was thick with the smell of sickness, of unwashed bodies and desperation, of a man pushed beyond his limits. She set her satchel down carefully near the entrance, her movements slow and deliberate, making herself smaller, less threatening. Nacho watched her from where he stood, Shadi still pressed against his chest, his body positioned between the woman and the far side of the teepee where his weapons lay. "May I?" Josefina asked softly, gesturing toward the baby. Her hands trembled as she held them out, and Nacho could see the wetness spreading further across her dress. The milk responding to Shadi's weak cries with a biology that transcended language and culture, and all the walls humans built between one another. For a long moment he didn't move. Everything in his warrior's training screamed at him to be cautious, to protect, to trust no stranger. But then Shadi whimpered again, and he felt her small body shudder with weakness. And he knew he had already made his choice the moment he opened the teepee flap. He stepped forward and gently transferred his daughter into Josefina's waiting arms. The moment was awkward, uncertain, their hands brushing as the child changed custody. Josefina gasped softly when she felt how hot Shadi was, how light, how the baby's skin seemed paper-thin over fragile bones. "Ay, pobrecita," she whispered, tears already streaming down her face. "Poor little one. You're so hungry, aren't you? So tired of hurting?" She cradled Shadi against her chest with the instinctive competence of a woman who had held her own child, who knew exactly how to support a baby's head, how to position small limbs for comfort. Nacho stood frozen, watching this stranger hold his daughter, fighting every instinct that told him to snatch Shadi back, his fists clenched at his sides. His jaw worked silently, but he forced himself to remain still, to wait, to see. Josefina moved to the blanket Nacho had been sitting on and lowered herself down with careful movements, wincing slightly as if her body hurt. She settled cross-legged, arranging Shadi in the crook of her left arm, and then her right hand went to the buttons at the front of her dress. Her fingers fumbled with them, shaking so badly she could barely work them free. When button 2, 3, the fabric parted, revealing the white cotton chemise underneath, already soaked through. She pulled the chemise aside, and her breast was revealed, swollen and hard. The skin stretched tight, veins visible beneath the surface like rivers on a map. Milk beaded at the nipple, then dripped, then flowed in small streams that darkened the blanket beneath her. "I haven't fed anyone in 3 months," she said, her voice breaking. "My body makes so much, too much. The pain, sometimes I can't sleep. I have to squeeze it out myself, waste it on the ground, and every drop feels like I'm betraying my son's memory." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She looked up at Nacho, her eyes pleading for understanding. "But this is what it was meant for. This is what my body keeps trying to tell me. That somewhere a baby needs this. That maybe God didn't curse me. Maybe he was just waiting." She guided Shadi toward her breast, supporting the baby's head with practiced gentleness. Shadi's eyes were half closed, her movements weak and uncoordinated, but when the nipple brushed her lips, instinct took over. Her mouth opened. She rooted toward the source of milk, the scent of it, the promise of it. And then contact. The baby's lips closed around Josefina's nipple, and for one breathless second, nothing happened. Then Shadi began to suck. The sound filled the teepee, rhythmic and desperate, the primal sound of life-sustaining life. Josefina cried out softly, her free hand flying to her mouth as milk let down with a force that made her whole body shudder. It had been so long since anything had drawn from her, since her body had fulfilled its purpose. The relief was physical, almost violent in its intensity, but beneath it was something else, something that went deeper than flesh and bone. Shadi drank like she was drowning and had just found air. Her small throat worked frantically, swallowing, gulping, making soft, desperate sounds between pulls. Her tiny hands, which had been listless moments before, suddenly came to life, grasping at Josefina's dress, kneading against her breast the way kittens knead their mother. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in weeks, her face relaxed into something that looked almost like peace. Josefina sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking, her tears falling onto Shadi's dark hair. "Sí, mi amor," she whispered in Spanish, then switched to broken English for Nicho's benefit. "Yes, drink. Drink all you need. I've so much for you, so much. You'll never be hungry again. I promise. I promise." She rocked gently, the motion automatic, and her free hand stroked Shadi's cheek with infinite tenderness. Nicho watched from where he stood, his throat tight, his eyes burning. He had tried everything to save his daughter, but it had taken a stranger, a Mexican woman he didn't know, walking out of the darkness to do what he couldn't. The gratitude that flooded through him was so intense it was almost painful, mixed with shame that he had failed where she succeeded, mixed with wonder at the mystery of how the universe sometimes answered prayers in the most unexpected ways. Shadi nursed for a long time, her sucking gradually slowing from frantic to steady to drowsy. Milk leaked from the corners of her mouth, running down her chin, more milk than she could swallow, because there was so much, because Josefina's body had been storing it for months, with nowhere for it to go. Finally, the baby's mouth went slack. She released the nipple and let out a small sigh, her belly finally full for the first time in weeks. Her eyes remained closed, her breathing deep and even, her small body completely relaxed. "She's asleep," Josefina whispered, looking down at the baby in her arms with an expression of such love and longing that it hurt to witness. Truly asleep, not just exhausted. "Look, you can see she's at peace." She glanced up at Nicho, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Thank you for letting me do this. You don't know what this means. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever." Nicho's voice was rough when he finally spoke. "I am the one who must thank you. You saved her life." He spoke in a mixture of Apache, Spanish, and English, the words clumsy but sincere. "I had nothing left to give her. No way to help. I was watching her die." He paused, swallowed hard. "You are an answer to prayer." Josefina shook her head, more tears falling. "No, you don't understand. I've been walking for days, maybe weeks. I don't even know anymore. After I buried Miguel, I couldn't stay in Tubac. Everyone looked at me with pity, or they avoided me because grief makes people uncomfortable. My husband's family blamed me for his death, said I must have done something wrong, some sin that brought God's punishment. My own family had no room for a widow with no money and a broken heart. So I left. I just started walking north, no destination, no plan. Just walking because staying still meant drowning in memories. She looked down at Shadi, stroked the baby's soft hair. "I thought about dying, many times. The desert is good for that if you want it. You just walk far enough from water and wait. But something kept me moving. Some voice I couldn't quite hear, pulling me forward. And now I know why. I was being led here, to her. To this child who needed exactly what I had." Nicho slowly lowered himself to sit across from her, his movements heavy with exhaustion now that the immediate crisis had passed. In the dim light, he studied this woman who had appeared like a spirit, who had brought salvation in the form of her own tragedy. Her face was beautiful, despite the exhaustion, despite the tears, despite the hollowness in her eyes. There was strength in her, he could see it. The kind of strength forged in fire and loss. "My wife died giving life to this child," he said quietly, the words coming easier now, as if Josefina's vulnerability gave him permission for his own. The bleeding wouldn't stop. The medicine woman tried, but sometimes even the strongest medicine fails. Her name was... He stopped, remembering the prohibition against speaking the names of the dead, but something in this moment felt sacred enough to break even that rule. Ayesha, her name was Ayesha. She was the sun in my sky, the song in my mornings. And when she left, she took all the light with her. "Miguel," Josefina said softly, understanding. "My son, and Carlos, my husband, both gone within a year. Carlos, they shot in the street for speaking against the governor's corruption. They didn't even hide it, just shot him down like a dog and left him bleeding in the dirt. I was 4 months pregnant, and I held him while he died, while our son kicked inside me, alive while his father stopped breathing." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "When Miguel was born, I thought maybe that was God's mercy, a new life to replace the one taken. But then the fever came, and I realized there is no replacement, no trade. Just loss upon loss upon loss." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound Shadi's soft breathing and the night wind outside the tipi. Two broken people, brought together by death and desperation, connected now by the fragile life sleeping between them. "What is her name?" Josefina asked finally. "Your daughter, Shadi," Nicho said. "It means older sister. We chose it hoping there would be more children, brothers and sisters for her to guide. But now she is alone, and the name feels like a broken promise." He paused, then asked, "How long can you stay?" "She will need to feed again. In a few hours, maybe sooner." Josefina looked down at the sleeping baby, her expression transforming from grief to something else. Determination. Purpose. "As long as you need me," she said firmly. "As long as she needs me. I have nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. If you'll let me stay, I'll feed her, every time she's hungry. For as long as my milk lasts." She looked up at him, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "I know I'm a stranger. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I swear on my son's grave, on my husband's memory, on the Virgin Mary herself, I will not harm this child. She is precious to me already. She is my second chance." Nicho felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he hadn't realized was there. "Then stay," he said simply. "For Shadi, for yourself. Stay as long as you wish." He gestured around the small tipi. "I have little comfort to offer. No soft bed, no rich food. But you will be safe here, protected. And when Shadi is strong again, when she no longer needs your milk, if you wish to leave, I will not stop you. If you wish to stay, there will be a place for you. Where will I sleep?" Josefina asked practically, even as Shadi continued to rest peacefully in her arms. Nicho rose and moved to the far side of the tipi, where several thick buffalo robes lay folded. He spread 2 of them out, creating a pallet, then added a worn but clean blanket on top. "Here," he said. "It's warm enough. I will sleep by the entrance, in case anyone comes." He didn't say in case soldiers come, in case we need to flee, but they both understood the unspoken words. Josefina carefully stood, cradling Shadi against her shoulder. The baby stirred slightly but didn't wake, her belly full, her body finally getting the nourishment it had been crying for. Josefina carried her to the pallet Nicho had prepared and slowly lowered herself down, arranging the blankets around them both. She positioned Shadi beside her, close enough to feel the baby's warmth, to hear her breathing, to know immediately if she woke. "I'll need to feed her again soon," Josefina said, her hand resting protectively on Shadi's small back. "My breasts, they're already filling again. It happens fast when there's a baby actually drinking. The body knows somehow, and it produces more." Nicho nodded, though he only partially understood. The mysteries of women's bodies, of birth and milk, and the nurturing of life were things his wife had tried to explain, but he had never fully grasped. Now he was learning, forced to understand because his daughter's life depended on it. He moved to his own sleeping area near the entrance, spreading out a single buffalo robe. As he settled down, he realized this was the first time since Ayasha's death that another adult presence had shared his living space. It should have felt intrusive, uncomfortable. Instead, it felt right. Like a piece that had been missing had suddenly clicked into place. "Nicho," Josefina's voice came softly through the darkness. "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me in." "No," he replied quietly. "Thank you for your milk, for your kindness, for not walking past when you heard my daughter crying." He paused, then added in careful Spanish, "Usted salvó su vida." "You saved her life." "She saved mine too," Josefina whispered back. "You just don't know it yet." Outside, the desert night deepened. Coyotes called in the distance, their voices rising and falling in eerie harmonies. An owl hooted from somewhere in the cliffs. The moon climbed higher, its light shifting the shadows inside the tipi, painting everything in silver and black. And for the first time in 2 months, Nicho closed his eyes and slept deeply, knowing his daughter was safe, knowing she was finally fed. He woke twice in the night to the sound of Shadi fussing, that particular cry that meant hunger. Each time he lay still and listened, as Josefina's voice murmured soft Spanish words, as fabric rustled, as the baby latched and began to nurse. The sounds were intimate, almost sacred, the most basic act of motherhood playing out in the darkness. He should have looked away, should have given them privacy, but he couldn't help watching the silhouettes. The curve of Josefina's back as she bent over the baby, the tender way she supported Shadi's head, the gentle rocking motion she maintained while the baby fed. Each time, after Shadi finished nursing and fell back asleep, Josefina would sing soft Spanish lullabies, the words barely audible, but the melody carrying clearly in the quiet. Songs her own mother had probably sung to her. Songs she had sung to Miguel in his brief life. Songs now offered to this Apache baby who understood nothing of their meaning but responded to the love in them nonetheless. When dawn came, filtering weak light through the tipi's smoke hole, Nicho woke to find Josefina already awake, sitting up with Shadi cradled in her arms, nursing once more. The morning light revealed what darkness had hidden. The baby's color was better. The flush of fever had faded from her cheeks. Her skin didn't look quite so loose, quite so papery. She was still painfully thin, still weak, but there was a visible difference. The difference between a child actively dying and a child being pulled back from the edge. Josefina looked up when she heard Nicho stirring, and she smiled. It was a small smile, fragile and uncertain, but it was there. "Buenos dias," she said softly. "She's fed 3 times since we slept. My milk, it's flowing easily now. Her sucking, it tells my body to make more, and so it does. It's the way it's supposed to work." She glanced down at Shadi, her expression filled with wonder. "She's stronger already. I can feel it in how she nurses. Last night she was so weak, barely able to suck. Now she has force behind it, determination." Nicho rose and came closer, crouching down to get a better look at his daughter. Shadi's eyes were open now, unfocused but alert, no longer glazed with fever and exhaustion. When he reached out to touch her cheek, she turned her head toward his hand, a response he hadn't seen in days. "Shadi," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You came back to me." The baby's mouth released Josefina's nipple long enough to make a small sound, not quite a coo, but not a cry either. Something in between. Then she rooted back toward the breast, found it, and resumed nursing. Milk dribbled from the corner of her mouth, and Josefina wiped it away gently with her thumb. "We should get water," Nicho said, forcing himself to think practically. "And I have dried meat if you're hungry. You need to eat too if you're going to feed her. Your body needs fuel to make milk." "I am hungry," Josefina admitted. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. I ran out of food yesterday and I was too tired to forage. But I didn't want to ask." "You don't ask," Nicho said firmly. "You are family now. Shadi's family. That makes you mine. You take what you need." He moved to his supplies, pulled out a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was dried venison, hard and dark but still good. He brought several strips to Josefina, along with a gourd filled with water. "Eat, drink. Your strength is Shadi's strength now." Josefina accepted the offerings with grateful hands, shifting Shadi to one arm so she could eat with the other. The meat was tough, requiring effort to chew, but the flavor was rich and good. She ate slowly, methodically, washing down each bite with water. All the while, Shadi continued to nurse, her small sounds of contentment filling the tipi with unexpected warmth. As Nicho watched them together, this widow and this baby, this unlikely pair brought together by loss and need, he felt something shift inside himself. The crushing weight of despair that had pressed down on him for weeks suddenly felt lighter. Not gone, never gone, but manageable. He had been alone in his grief, drowning in it, and now there was someone else who understood, someone who carried her own ocean of sorrow, but still had the strength to reach out a hand. "Today," he said quietly, "I'll hunt. Bring back fresh meat, maybe rabbit if I can find them. You need more than dried venison. You need good food, rich food, to keep your milk strong." Josefina looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You don't have to do that." "Yes," Nacho said simply, "I do. You're feeding my daughter. The least I can do is feed you." He paused, then added, "Besides, it will be good to hunt again, to do something normal. For 2 months I've done nothing but watch her fade. Now I can hunt, knowing she'll be here when I return, alive, growing stronger." Shadi finished nursing and fell back asleep, milk-drunk and peaceful. Josefina held her close, breathing in the scent of her, feeling the warmth of her, and closed her own eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "go hunt. We'll be here. We'll be waiting." And Nacho believed her. 3 weeks passed, and the canyon became a different place. Where there had been silence and despair, now there was the sound of a baby cooing, of a woman humming while she worked, of life reasserting itself against the desert's cruelty. Shadi had transformed from a skeletal, fever-racked infant into a child who smiled, who kicked her legs with vigor, whose cheeks had begun to round with the fullness that came from regular feeding. Her eyes, once dull and unfocused, now tracked. Movement followed faces, sparkled with infant curiosity about the world around her. Josefina had settled into the rhythm of the tipi as if she'd always belonged there. She woke before dawn to nurse Shadi, then again mid-morning, then at noon, then throughout the afternoon and evening in a cycle that her body had adapted to with remarkable efficiency. Between feedings, she worked. She mended Nacho's clothes, with needle and thread from her satchel, her stitches small and precise. She gathered edible plants from the canyon, recognizing mesquite pods, prickly pear fruit, wild onions, and herbs that Nacho hadn't known were there. She washed clothes in the small stream that trickled through the rocks, beating them against stones until they were cleaner than they'd been in months. She cooked, transforming Nacho's simple provisions into meals that actually tasted of care and attention. Nacho, for his part, hunted with renewed purpose. He brought back rabbits, quail, once even a young deer that had wandered too close to his carefully placed snares. He repaired the tipi, replacing worn poles and patching holes in the buffalo hide covering. He built a proper cooking area outside with a circle of stones and a grate fashioned from green wood. He even constructed a second sleeping platform, raising it off the ground with rocks and covered with fresh pine boughs, so Josefina wouldn't have to sleep on the hard earth. They developed a wordless partnership, born from necessity, but growing into something more. When Josefina needed firewood, Nacho brought it without being asked. When Nacho came back from hunting with blood on his clothes, Josefina had water already heated for washing. They ate together in the evenings, sharing the single clay bowl, passing it back and forth while Shadi slept between them. Their conversations were still halting, limited by language barriers, but they learned. Nacho's Spanish improved. Josefina picked up Apache words, and when words failed, gestures and expressions filled the gaps. But the outside world was not as kind as their small canyon sanctuary. The first hint of trouble came on a bright morning when Nacho rode to the trading post at Apache Pass, a rough collection of adobe buildings where Mexicans, Americans, and the few remaining free Apache came to barter. He needed ammunition, salt, and a few other supplies he couldn't make or find himself. The trading post was run by a grizzled former mountain man named Hendrix, who asked no questions and cared only about fair trades. When Nacho entered the dim interior of the trading post, the conversation stopped. 3 Mexican cowboys stood near the counter, their clothes dusty from trail riding. An American prospector sat in the corner, nursing a bottle of whiskey, and Hendricks himself stood behind the wooden plank that served as his counter, his one good eye fixing on Nitro while the other, clouded by an old injury, stared off at nothing. "Nitro," Hendricks said with a nod. "Ain't seen you in weeks. Heard your baby died. My condolences." "She lives," Nitro said simply, setting his bundle of furs on the counter. "Prime rabbit pelts, well cured, worth good trade." One of the Mexican cowboys, a lean man with a scar running through his left eyebrow, spoke up. "Lives? That's not what we heard. We heard the baby was starving, that you couldn't feed her. How's a baby supposed to live without milk?" His tone was curious, but with an edge of something else. Suspicion. "She has milk now," Nitro said carefully. Examining the ammunition Hendricks was laying out for his inspection. "From where?" another cowboy asked, this one younger, maybe 20, with the swagger of someone trying to prove himself. "Ain't no nursing women in these parts. We'd know. News like that travels." Nitro said nothing, counting out bullets, testing their weight. "I heard something interesting," the scarred cowboy continued, leaning against a support post, picking his teeth with a splinter of wood. "My cousin, he was passing through your canyon 2 days ago, said he saw smoke from your teepee, and he saw a woman, a Mexican woman, hanging clothes to dry." He paused, letting that sink in. "Now where would you get a Mexican woman way out here? And why would she be doing your washing?" The trading post went very quiet. Even the prospector in the corner stopped drinking, his attention now focused on the conversation. Nitro's hand moved slowly to the knife at his belt, not drawing it, just resting there. "A woman came to my teepee," he said evenly. "She was lost, needed help. I gave her shelter. She nurses my daughter in exchange. It's a fair arrangement." "Fair?" The young cowboy laughed, a harsh sound. "That's what you call it? An Apache warrior and a Mexican woman living together, no marriage, no priest, just living in sin while she feeds your baby? That's not fair. That's shameful, indecent." "Careful, boy," Hendricks said quietly. "Nitro's a customer. We don't judge customers here." But the scarred cowboy wasn't done. "What's her name, this woman? Where's she from? Does she have family looking for her? Because if she's a runaway, if she's hiding from something, that's information worth knowing, information worth sharing." "Her business is her own," Nitro said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "As is mine. We harm no one. We break no laws." "Leave it alone. No laws?" The young cowboy stepped forward. "You're Apache. Your whole existence breaks the law. You're supposed to be on the reservation at San Carlos, not living free out here. And now you've got some Mexican woman living with you in sin. What do you think the authorities would say about that? What do you think the church would say?" Nitro turned to face them fully now, his body language shifting from neutral to ready. "The church," he said slowly, "burned my people's sacred places. The authorities hunt us like animals. I don't care what either thinks. I care that my daughter lives. That's all." The scarred cowboy's hand drifted toward his gun belt, and the air in the trading post crackled with tension. But before anyone could move, Hendricks slammed his hand down on the counter with a bang that made everyone jump. "Enough," the old trader said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd survived decades in hostile territory by knowing when to draw lines. "This is a trading post, not a church and not a courtroom. You boys want to gossip like old women, do it outside. Nitro came here to trade, and that's what we're going to do. Anyone got a problem with that can leave now." The Mexicans exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, the scarred one shrugged. "No problem here, viejo. Just making conversation." But his eyes, when they fixed on Nitro, were cold and calculating. "We meant no disrespect. Just curious about the woman, that's all. A woman alone in the desert, nursing another woman's baby. It's an unusual situation. Makes people wonder. Let them wonder," Nitro said. He completed his trade with Hendricks quickly, taking the ammunition and salt, leaving the furs. As he turned to go, the scarred cowboy spoke one more time. "Be careful, Apache. People talk, And talk has a way of reaching the wrong ears. The army, the reservation agents, even the church. They all take an interest in unusual situations, especially situations involving Indians living free and women of questionable virtue. Naicho didn't respond. He simply walked out into the harsh sunlight, mounted his horse and rode away. But the seed had been planted. The whispers had begun. When he returned to the canyon that evening, he found Josefina sitting outside the tipi with Shadi in her lap, singing to the baby in Spanish, while the sunset painted the cliffs in shades of orange and gold. She looked up when she heard his horse, her face brightening with a smile that dimmed when she saw his expression. "What happened?" she asked, switching to English. "Something is wrong. I can see it." Naicho dismounted, unsaddled his horse, and took his time responding. He didn't want to frighten her, but she deserved to know. "People know you're here," he said finally. "At the trading post, they were asking questions. Who you are, where you came from, why you're here." Josefina's face went pale. She clutched Shadi a little tighter. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That you needed shelter, that you nurse Shadi, that it's an arrangement, nothing more." He sat down beside her, his movements heavy. "But they didn't like it. Called it shameful, indecent, said the authorities should know." "The authorities," Josefina repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Dios mío. If they start asking questions, if they look into who I am, they'll find out about Carlos. But how he died. The federales might still be looking for his family, for anyone connected to him. They don't like loose ends, especially not widows who might carry their husband's secrets." Her hands trembled. "And if the church gets involved, they'll call me a sinner, an unwed woman living with a man, nursing his child. They'll say I've abandoned my morals, that I'm no better than a prostitute." "You are nothing of the kind," Naicho said firmly. "You are a woman who saved my daughter's life, who gives freely of herself. There is no sin in that. You know that." "I know that, but they won't see it that way." She looked down at Shadi, who had fallen asleep against her chest, milk-drunk and content. "Maybe I should leave, before I bring trouble to your door, before my presence here endangers you and Shadi." "No," Naicho said, and the force in his voice surprised even himself. "You're not leaving. Shadi still needs you. I still need you." He paused, then corrected himself. "We need you. You belong here now. But if they come," Josefina said, tears forming in her eyes, "if the soldiers come or the reservation agents, what then? They'll take Shadi to the reservation. They'll take you too. And me, they'll drag back to Mexico, back to questions I can't answer, back to people who hate me for loving a revolutionary." Naicho was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The desert evening deepened around them, shadows stretching long and dark. Finally he spoke. "Then we prepare. We make plans. If they come, we run. I know places in the mountains, hidden valleys where the soldiers never go. We can survive there. The three of us." "Three," Josefina repeated softly as if testing the word. "You would run? Give up this place, this canyon, for us." "And this canyon is just earth and rock," Naicho said. "You and Shadi, you are family. Family is worth more than any place." He met her eyes, held her gaze. "When Ayasha died, I thought family was over for me, that I would raise Shadi alone and lonely, and when she was grown, I would grow old with nothing but memories. But then you came, and now when I think of family, I see three people. Not one, three." A tear rolled down Josefina's cheek. "In Mexico, I had no one after Carlos and Miguel died. I walked into the desert to die because I couldn't imagine a reason to live. But you gave me one. This baby, she gave me purpose. And you gave me safety, respect, a place to belong." She shifted Shadi carefully, then reached out with her free hand and placed it over Naicho's. "If trouble comes, we face it together, as family, but I won't run unless you say we must. And I won't leave unless you send me away." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. "I will never send you away," Naicho said quietly. Their hands remained clasped, calloused palm against calloused palm. Two people who had known crushing loss, now finding unexpected strength in each other. That night, after Shadi had been fed and put to sleep in her cradle board, after the fire had burned down to coals, Naicho and Josefina sat together in the darkness. The night sounds surrounded them, crickets and owls and the distant yipping of coyotes. The stars overhead were bright and innumerable, the same stars that had witnessed countless human dramas, countless moments of connection and loss. What was she like? Josefina asked suddenly. Ayasha, if you can speak of her. Naicho was silent for so long that Josefina thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly he began. She laughed at everything, even things that weren't funny. She said life was too hard to waste time being serious. She could track a deer better than most warriors, but she couldn't cook meat without burning it. He smiled slightly at the memory. She sang off-key and didn't care. She named every horse we owned, gave them ridiculous names like Jumps at Butterflies and Afraid of His Shadow. She wanted 5 children, said our Tipi would be too quiet with just one. His voice caught. She died trying to give Shadi a sibling. The baby, a boy, he was born dead. Yasha followed him hours later. I buried them together, mother and son, so she wouldn't be alone in the spirit world. Josefina wiped her eyes. Carlos loved maps. He collected them, old ones, new ones, maps of places he'd never been. He said someday we'd travel, see the world beyond Mexico. He died in the street, holding a map of California, where he'd planned to take me after Miguel was born. I burned it with him, so he could find his way in the next world. She took a shaky breath. Miguel, he was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a full head of dark hair. He nursed well, slept well, smiled early. And then one morning he woke up hot, and by that evening he was gone. Just gone, like someone blew out a candle. They sat with their grief, sharing it, letting it exist between them without trying to fix or minimize it. The pain didn't lessen, but somehow carrying it together made it more bearable. Do you think they know? Josefina asked after a while. The ones we lost. Do you think they see us now, see us trying to build something from the ruins they left behind? Oh, the Apache believe the dead walk the spirit road, Naicho said. That they watch over those they loved, guide them sometimes. If that's true, then yes, Ayasha knows. She knows her daughter lives because of you, and I think she's grateful. I hope Miguel knows too, Josefina whispered. I hope he understands that loving Shadi doesn't mean I love him less. That feeding her doesn't betray his memory. I hope he knows. He knows, Naicho said with certainty. How could he not? You speak his name with such love. You carry him in every breath. He knows. The next morning brought new concerns. Naicho was checking his snares near the canyon entrance when he saw dust rising in the distance. Riders, at least 4 of them, coming from the direction of the trading post. He didn't wait to see who they were. He ran back to the teepee, his heart pounding. Riders coming, he said urgently as he burst through the entrance. We need to hide now. Josefina didn't ask questions. She scooped up Shadi, grabbed her satchel and followed Naicho out of the teepee. He led them up a narrow trail that climbed the canyon wall, a path barely wide enough for single file, hidden by scrub brush and rocks. They climbed for 15 minutes, Josefina breathing hard, until they reached a small cave, little more than an overhang, but deep enough to hide them from view below. Stay here, Naicho said. Stay quiet. If I call for you, come down. If you hear gunfire, go deeper into the mountains and don't look back. There's an Apache camp 2 days north. Ask for Guyan. Tell her I sent you. She'll help. Naicho. Josefina grabbed his arm. Be careful, please. He nodded once, then descended the trail. By the time he reached the canyon floor, the riders were already there. 4 Mexican cowboys, including the scarred one and the young hothead from the trading post. They sat on their horses, looking around at his camp with undisguised curiosity. Naicho, the scarred one said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hope you don't mind the visit. We were riding past, thought we'd stop and see how you're doing. Make sure everything's all right with you and that woman of yours. She's not my woman, Naicho said evenly. And everything is fine. You can go now. Oh, don't be unfriendly, the young one said. We just want to meet her, this mysterious woman who appeared from nowhere. It's only neighborly. He dismounted, started walking toward the teepee. Nitro stepped into his path. She's not here. She went to gather plants. Won't be back until evening. The cowboy's eyes narrowed. Is that so? Mind if we wait? Yeah, Nitro said flatly. I mind. This is my land, my camp. You're not welcome here. Leave. The scarred one dismounted as well, his hand resting on his pistol. Now, Apache, that's no way to talk to neighbors. We're just concerned citizens, that's all. We heard rumors about a woman who might be running from the law, might be wanted for questioning in Mexico. We have a duty to check these things out. You have no duty here, Nitro said, his own hand moving to his knife. And no authority. You're trespassing. I'm asking you once more to leave. The other two cowboys dismounted, forming a loose semicircle. 4 against 1, and they knew it. The scarred one smiled. We'll leave when we're satisfied there's no lawbreaker hiding here. Now where's the woman? From her hiding place above, Josefina watched, her heart in her throat, Shadi pressed against her chest. She saw the standoff, saw the odds, saw Nitro's hand on his knife, and she made a choice. She stood up, stepped to the edge of the overhang where they could see her, and called down in Spanish, I'm here. What do you want with me? All eyes turned upward. The cowboys stared. Nitro's expression was a mixture of frustration and fear. And Josefina, standing in the harsh sunlight with a baby in her arms, looked down at them with a courage born from having already lost everything that mattered, with nothing left to fear except losing this new family she'd found. Come down, the scarred cowboy called up. We just want to ask you some questions. Nothing to be afraid of. I'm not afraid, Josefina called back, and it was true. But I'm not coming down until you give me your word, on your honor, that you won't harm this man or this child. Swear it and I'll answer your questions. The cowboys exchanged glances. Finally, the scarred one nodded. You have my word. No harm to the Apache or the baby? Just questions. Slowly, carefully, Josefina descended the trail, Nitro meeting her halfway, his face tight with worry. Together, they walked back to face the riders, their small family of 3 standing against whatever judgment the world wanted to deliver. Josefina stood before the 4 mounted cowboys with her chin raised, Shadi cradled protectively in her arms. The baby had begun to fuss, sensing the tension in the air, making small sounds of distress that cut through the desert silence. Nitro positioned himself slightly in front of Josefina, his body language making clear that anyone who wanted to reach her would have to go through him first. The scarred cowboy dismounted fully now, dusting off his pants with exaggerated casualness. His 3 companions remained on their horses, hands resting near their weapons, eyes watching everything. So, he said, looking Josefina up and down with an appraising gaze that made her skin crawl. You're the mystery woman. Got a name? Josefina, she said simply, offering no more than that. Josefina what? Where you from? What brings you to an Apache camp in the middle of nowhere? The questions came rapid fire, designed to unsettle, to catch her in a lie. My family name is my own business, Josefina replied steadily. I came from the south. I was traveling, got lost, needed shelter. This man gave it to me. In return, I nurse his daughter. It's a simple arrangement born of necessity, nothing more. The young cowboy laughed harshly. Simple. A Mexican woman living with an Apache warrior, nursing his baby, sleeping in his teepee. Lady, there ain't nothing simple about that. It's scandalous, immoral. You got no husband, no chaperone, no family watching over you. You're living in sin. Sin, Josefina repeated, her voice hardening. You want to talk about sin? The sin is letting a baby starve when you have the means to feed her. The sin is turning away from someone in need because they don't look like you or pray like you. The sin is judging people whose pain you know nothing about. She took a step forward, her fear transforming into anger. I lost my son 3 months ago. My body still makes milk for him, milk he will never drink. This baby was dying. Her father had tried everything and failed. So yes, I feed her. I give her what my body makes, what would otherwise be wasted. What causes me pain every day, it goes unused. Where is the sin in that? Where is the immorality in saving a life? The scarred cowboy's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the faint recognition of uncomfortable truth. "That's a pretty speech," he said after a moment. "But it don't change facts. You're an unwed woman living with a man. The church has rules about such things. Society has expectations. The church," Josefina said bitterly, "buried my husband and my son in the same week and offered me nothing but empty prayers. Society told me I was cursed, that God was punishing me for some unknown sin. So forgive me if I don't care much for the church's rules or society's expectations. I care about this child living. That's all." One of the other cowboys, older than the rest with grey streaking his dark hair, spoke up for the first time. "The baby, she looks healthy now, well-fed, content." His voice was quieter, less accusatory. "I got children of my own. I know what a starving baby looks like, and I know what a thriving one looks like. Whatever arrangement you got here, it's working." "Thank you," Nitro said quietly, speaking directly to this cowboy, recognizing an ally or at least someone less hostile than the others. "My daughter would be dead without this woman. She is family to us now. We harm no one. We want only to be left in peace." The scarred cowboy shook his head. "It ain't about harm, Apache. It's about propriety, about doing things the right way. You want this woman living with you. Fine, marry her. Make it legal. Make it proper. Otherwise, people are going to talk, and talk leads to investigations. Investigations lead to soldiers, to reservation agents, to all kinds of trouble you don't want. Marry?" Josefina's voice came out strangled. She looked at Nitro, saw his expression carefully neutral, and felt her heart begin to race. "We barely know each other. We're not in love. We're just two people helping each other survive." "Don't matter if you're in love," the young cowboy sneered. "Plenty of marriages got nothing to do with love. It's about legitimacy, about making things respectable. You marry him, you become his legal wife. Nobody can say nothing then. Baby gets a mother, Apache gets a wife, you get protection and a home. Everybody wins, except we don't want that," Josefina said firmly, though her voice shook slightly. "Marriage is sacred. It should be entered into with intention, with love, with commitment, not as a legal convenience to satisfy gossips and busybodies." The scarred cowboy shrugged. "Suit yourself, but I'm telling you how it is. You keep living like this, unmarried and unchaperoned, the talk will only get worse. Eventually it'll reach ears that matter. The army, the church authorities, the Mexican government if they're looking for you." He let that last part hang in the air. Watching her reaction, Josefina's face went pale, but she said nothing, refusing to give him the satisfaction of confirming his suspicions. "Thought so," he said with a cold smile. "You are running from something. I can see it in your eyes, which means you got even more reason to make this arrangement legal. A married woman has protections, rights. A woman living in sin with an Apache has nothing. You think about that." He mounted his horse again, the others following suit. "We'll be on our way now, but I meant what I said. You want to avoid trouble, you make this proper. Get married, get it recorded, make it official. Otherwise, next time it won't be us asking questions. It'll be someone with a badge and a gun, and a lot less patience." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Ma'am, Apache, you have yourselves a good day now." They rode off in a cloud of dust, their laughter carrying back across the desert. Nitro and Josefina stood frozen, watching them disappear into the shimmering heat haze. Shadi had stopped fussing, was now nursing contentedly, oblivious to the storm her presence had created. When the riders were finally out of sight, Josefina's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, trembling, still holding Shadi close. "Dios mío," she whispered. "Dios mío, what have I done? I've brought trouble to your door just like I feared. They know I'm running. They'll tell others. It's only a matter of time before someone comes looking. Someone who won't just talk and leave." Nitro crouched beside her, his hand hovering near her shoulder before finally settling there, a tentative gesture of comfort. "You've brought no trouble that wasn't already here," he said quietly. "I'm Apache, living free when I'm supposed to be on a reservation. I was already a target. You changed nothing except saving my daughter's life. But marriage, Josefina said, looking up at him with wide, frightened eyes. They want us to marry, to make this legal, to make it proper. But we can't, we barely know each other. You loved your wife. I loved my husband. How can we marry when our hearts belong to dead people? Naicho was quiet for a long time, his hand still on her shoulder. The sun beat down mercilessly, and somewhere in the distance a hawk cried. Finally he spoke. Ayasha is gone. I will always love her memory, always honor what we had. But she's gone and I'm still here, still living, still needing to protect my daughter. He paused. The cowboy was right about one thing. Marriage would give us protection, legal standing. It would make them leave us alone. But it would be a lie, Josefina protested. A marriage of convenience, not love. Doesn't that cheapen it? Doesn't that dishonor the real marriages we had? Now, I don't know, Naicho admitted. Apache marriages are different from Mexican marriages, from American marriages. We have no priests, no papers. A man and woman decide to be together. They share a tipi. They raise children. They're married. It's that simple. The ceremony is for the community, not for the couple. The commitment is what matters, not the words spoken over it. Josefina shifted Shadi to her other breast, thinking. In my faith, marriage is a sacrament, sacred, forever. When I married Carlos, I promised God I would be his wife until death. And death parted us. So technically I'm free to marry again. But it feels wrong, like I'd be betraying him. Would he want you to live alone forever? Naicho asked gently. Would he want you hunted, endangered because you tried to do good? Or would he want you safe and protected, even if it meant marrying someone you don't love? I don't know, Josefina whispered. I don't know what he'd want. I only know what I want. And I want to stay here, with you and Shadi. I want to keep feeding her, watching her grow. I want this family we've accidentally created. But I want it to be real, not a legal fiction designed to satisfy strangers. Then we make it real, Naicho said simply. Not today, not forced by cowboys and threats. But slowly, over time. We already share a home, share meals, share the raising of Shadi. We already trust each other with our lives, our secrets, our grief. Maybe that's enough foundation to build something more. Not a replacement for what we lost, but something new. Something different but still good. Josefina looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the strength in his face, the kindness in his eyes, the way he'd never once treated her with anything but respect and gratitude. Saw the way he looked at Shadi, the fierce protective love that made him willing to face down armed men. Saw the loneliness that matched her own, the grief that mirrored hers. And she thought about the past 3 weeks, how easy it had been to fall into rhythm with him, how natural it felt to work beside him, to sit with him in comfortable silence, to share stories of their lost loves without jealousy or competition. I need time, she said finally. I need to think about this, to pray about it, to make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons, not out of fear but out of choice. Can you give me that time? All the time you need, Naicho promised. No pressure, no expectations. You stay as long as you wish, leave if you must, marry me if you choose or don't if you don't. Whatever you decide, you'll always be family, always be welcome, always be safe here. Shadi finished nursing and let out a small burp, her eyes closing in satisfaction. Josefina looked down at the baby and felt her heart clench. She'd fallen in love with this child, she realized. Completely, irrevocably in love. The thought of leaving, of never seeing her again, was unbearable. And Naicho, she'd grown to care for him too, in a way that was different from what she'd felt for Carlos, but no less real. Not romantic love, not yet, maybe never, but partnership, respect, deep affection. The beginnings of something that could become more, given time and nurturing. That night they ate dinner in silence, the weight of the day's events hanging between them. After Shadi was asleep, Josefina went outside to sit under the stars, needing space to think. Naicho let her go, understanding the need for solitude. But an hour later, when he heard her crying, he couldn't stay away. He found her sitting on a flat rock, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. "Josefina," he said softly, announcing his presence. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm sorry, everything today, it brought it all back. Carlos, Miguel, the life I lost. The life I'll never have. And now these men threatening us, forcing decisions, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what's right anymore." Nacho sat beside her, close but not touching. "Tell me about them," he said. "Tell me about Carlos and Miguel. I want to know." So she did. She talked for hours, pouring out stories she'd kept bottled up for months. Carlos's laugh, his passion for justice, his dreams of a better Mexico. The way he'd held her when she was scared, the way he'd sung to her belly when she was pregnant. Miguel's birth, the joy of it, the perfection of him. His first smile, his tiny fingers wrapped around hers, the way he'd nursed with such contentment. And then the fever, the desperate prayers, the moment his small body went limp. The emptiness that followed, the way her arms ached for weight they'd never hold again. Nacho listened without interrupting, and when she finally fell silent, he spoke. "Ayasha wanted 5 children," he said quietly. She had names picked out for all of them. The second one, the son who died with her, she was going to call him Kele, which means sparrow. She said he would fly high and free, never trapped by reservation fences or white man's rules. His voice caught. Instead, he flew straight to the spirit world and took her with him. "Sometimes I'm angry at him, this baby I never met. Angry that his death killed her. Then I feel guilty for the anger, and the guilt makes me angrier, and it's a circle with no end. I'm angry too," Josefina admitted. "Angry at God for taking them. Angry at myself for not saving Miguel. Angry at Carlos for getting himself killed and leaving me alone. Angry at the world for being so cruel. And then guilty for the anger because they didn't choose to die. They didn't choose to leave me. Anger is easier than grief," Nacho said. "Grief is heavy, drowning. Anger makes you feel strong, even when you're breaking inside." They sat together under the stars, 2 broken people learning that sometimes the only way to carry grief is to share the weight. And slowly, without deciding to, without planning it, Josefina's hand found Nacho's, their fingers intertwined, calloused palm against calloused palm, and they held on. "I think," Josefina said after a long silence, "that maybe Carlos and Ayasha would understand. About us, about what we're trying to build here. They loved us. They'd want us to live, not just survive. They'd want us to find joy again, even if it's different joy than what we had with them." "I think so too," Nacho agreed. "Ayasha always said life was for the living, that the dead don't need our suffering, only our love and remembrance. She'd want Shadi to have a mother. She'd want me to have a partner. She'd understand." "Then maybe," Josefina said slowly, testing the words, "maybe we don't have to decide about marriage right now. Maybe we just keep doing what we're doing, building trust, building family. And if it grows into something more, if we reach a point where marriage feels right and true, instead of forced and legal, then we consider it. But on our terms, our timeline, not because cowboys with guns tell us to." "That sounds wise," Nacho said. He squeezed her hand gently. "We move at the speed of trust, at the speed of healing, no faster." They sat that way for a long time, hands clasped, finding comfort in presence rather than words. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human drama, constant in their turning. A meteor streaked across the sky, burning bright and brief, and Josefina made a wish she didn't speak aloud. When they finally returned to the Tipi, something had shifted between them. Not love, not yet, but something equally important: understanding, acceptance, the knowledge that they were both wounded, both healing, both trying their best with broken pieces. And maybe, just maybe, 2 broken people could support each other better than 2 whole ones, because they understood the weight of carrying fractures. Nacho added wood to the fire, building it up for the night. Josefina checked on Shadi, smiled at the baby's peaceful sleep, then settled onto her own pallet. But before lying down, she spoke. "Nacho, thank you. For listening, for understanding, for not pushing." "Thank you," he replied from his place by the entrance, "for staying, for saving her, for being brave enough to come down from that cave today when you could have hidden. We're family, Josefina said simply. Family protects each other. Yes, Nitro agreed. We do. The fire crackled softly. Outside, a coyote called was answered by another, and inside the teepee, 3 people slept, bound together not by blood or law, but by need and choice and the slow, careful building of trust. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The cowboys' threat still hung over them. The question of marriage still loomed unanswered. But tonight they had each other. They had Shadi breathing softly between them. They had shelter and safety and the beginning of something neither could quite name, but both recognized as precious. In the morning, Nitro woke to find Josefina already up, nursing Shadi and humming. When she saw him stirring, she smiled. Not a big smile, still tentative and touched with sadness, but genuine. "Buenos dias," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied, returning the smile. And for the first time since Ayasha's death, the morning felt like a beginning rather than just another day of surviving. Outside, the sun was rising over the canyon walls, painting everything in gold. A new day, a new chance, and 3 people facing it together, whatever it might bring. 2 months had passed since the cowboy's visit, and the canyon had settled into an uneasy peace. Shadi had grown fat and healthy, her laughter now a daily sound that echoed off the red stone walls. She could hold her head up steadily, track objects with her bright eyes, and had recently discovered her own hands, staring at them with an expression of wonder that made both Nitro and Josefina smile. The bond between the 3 of them had deepened in ways neither adult had anticipated, moving from necessity towards something that resembled genuine family. Josefina had stopped talking about leaving. She'd made the teepee more of a home, weaving grass mats for the floor, hanging dried herbs from the lodge poles, even painting traditional Mexican designs on clay bowls she'd formed from the red earth near the stream. Nacho had built her a proper loom from cottonwood branches, and she'd begun weaving blankets from wool he'd traded for at the post, her fingers moving with practiced skill while she sang to Shadi. They'd fallen into comfortable rhythms, anticipating each other's needs, working side by side without awkwardness. He hunted and she cooked. She mended and he gathered firewood. They shared stories in the evenings, their languages blending into a unique dialect only they understood fully. The question of marriage hung between them, unspoken but present. Neither had raised it again, both content to let things develop naturally. But Nitro had begun leaving small gifts for Josefina, items he'd crafted during his solitary hours. A carved wooden comb for her long hair, a pair of soft deerskin moccasins that fit her perfectly, a necklace of turquoise and silver beads he'd traded half a deer for. She accepted them with quiet gratitude, and in return she'd embroidered his shirts with delicate patterns, cooked his favorite foods, sat closer to him by the fire each night. They were courting in their way, slow and careful, building something neither had words for yet. Then came the morning that shattered their fragile peace. Nicho had ridden out before dawn to check his traps in the high country, expecting to be gone only a few hours. Josefina was alone with Shadi, kneeling by the stream washing clothes, the baby secured in a cradle board, propped against a nearby rock where she could see her. The morning was beautiful, cool and clear, with the promise of heat to come. Birds sang in the scrub-brush. A light breeze carried the scent of sage. Josefina was humming a lullaby, completely at peace, when she heard the horses. She looked up sharply, her hands stilling in the cold water. Riders, at least 6 of them, coming fast down the canyon trail. Not the cautious approach of traders or the careful advance of soldiers. This was something else, something urgent and threatening. Her heart began to race. She grabbed Shady's cradleboard and ran for the tipi, water dripping from her skirts, her breath coming in gasps. She'd barely made it inside when they arrived. Through the gap in the tipi entrance, she could see them. Mexican bandits, rough men with gun belts and cruel faces, riding hard-used horses. The leader was a massive man with a scarred face and a black beard streaked with gray. She recognized him instantly and her blood turned to ice. Ramon Vega, one of the federales who'd hunted Carlos, who'd been there when they shot him down. He'd disappeared after Carlos's death, rumored to have deserted and turned bandit. And now he was here. Search everything, Vega barked in Spanish, dismounting heavily. They said an Apache lives here with a Mexican woman. If it's her, if it's Josefina Alvarez, there's a reward. The governor still wants anyone connected to that revolutionary bastard Carlos brought in for questioning. Josefina pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. They weren't here by accident. Someone had told them, had sold information about her location. Probably those cowboys, looking to collect whatever bounty the Mexican government had offered. She looked down at Shadi, who was beginning to fuss, sensing her fear. With trembling hands, she unbuttoned her dress and guided the baby to her breast, praying the nursing would keep her quiet. Outside, the bandits were tearing through Nicho's possessions. She heard clay bowls smashing, the sound of her loom being kicked over, rough laughter as they found the few items of value and pocketed them. One of them approached the Tipi. "Boss, someone's in here," the man called. "I can hear breathing." "Pull them out," Vega ordered. "Let's see what we caught." The Tipi flap was yanked open violently, flooding the interior with harsh sunlight. A bandit reached in and grabbed Josefina's arm, dragging her out with such force she nearly dropped Shadi. She clutched the baby desperately, stumbling into the open, blinking against the brightness. Vega's eyes widened when he saw her. Then he smiled, a terrible expression full of malice and satisfaction. Well, Josefina Alvarez, the revolutionary's widow. We've been looking for you for over a year." He walked closer, his boots crunching on the scattered remains of her pottery. "You disappeared after your husband died. Like smoke. We searched Tubac, questioned everyone. Nothing. And here you are, hiding with a savage, nursing a half-breed baby." He looked at Shadi with disgust.
"Fallen pretty far, haven't you?"
"From revolutionary's wife to Apache whore." "Don't call me that," Josefina said, finding her voice despite her terror. "I'm no whore. This baby's mother died. I'm feeding her because she would have starved otherwise. There's no shame in that." "No shame," Vega laughed. "You're living with an Apache warrior, unmarried, unchaperoned. What would you call it?" He gestured to his men. "Tie her up. We're taking her back to Mexico. The governor will be pleased. He thinks she has information about the other revolutionaries' names and locations. He'll pay well for her." "I know nothing," Josefina said desperately as two bandits grabbed her arms. "Carlos never told me anything. He protected me by keeping me ignorant. I can't tell the governor what I don't know. That's for him to decide," Vega said coldly. "And trust me, he has ways of making people remember things they didn't know they knew." He looked at Shadi, still nursing at Josefina's breast. "What about the baby? You want us to bring her too or leave her here for the coyotes?" Josefina's eyes went wide with horror. "You can't leave her. She'll die. Please, she's innocent in all this. Let me take her. Let me keep feeding her, please." Vega considered this, his expression calculating. "A baby will slow us down, make you less useful. But I suppose we can sell her to someone at the border. Apache babies fetch a price from certain buyers. People who want servants they can train from infancy." He nodded to his men. "Bring them both. We leave in 5 minutes." As the bandits began tying Josefina's wrists with rough rope, she heard it. The sound that made her heart soar and plummet simultaneously. Hoofbeats, a single rider coming fast. Nicho returning early, probably sensing something was wrong. The bandits heard it too. They drew their weapons, spreading out, forming a line between Josefina and the canyon trail. Nicho rode into view and immediately took in the scene. His camp destroyed. Josefina bound and surrounded by armed men. Strangers holding his daughter. His face went absolutely cold, the expression of a warrior who'd made the calculation and accepted the cost. He dismounted slowly, his hands visible and empty, but his eyes never left Shadi. "Apache!" Vega called out. "You picked the wrong woman to shelter. She's wanted by the Mexican government. We're taking her back. You stay out of this, you live. You interfere, you die. Simple choice." Nicho's eyes flicked to Josefina, saw the terror in her face, the tears streaming down her cheeks. Then to Shadi, still at her breast, unaware of the danger. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried clearly across the space. The woman stays. The child stays. You leave now. Vega laughed, a harsh sound. You're brave, I'll give you that. But stupid. There's 6 of us and 1 of you. We're all armed. What are you going to do, Apache? Throw rocks? If necessary, Nitro said. His hand moved to his belt, not to the knife they could see, but to something hidden beneath his shirt. When his hand emerged, it held a U.S. Army Colt revolver, taken from a soldier he'd killed 3 years ago. The bandits tensed, but Vega just smiled wider. 6 guns against 1. Still bad odds, Savage? I only need 1 bullet, Nitro said, and his gun was suddenly aimed directly at Vega's head. You die first. Before your men can draw, before anyone can move, you die. That's a promise. So you decide. Is catching 1 woman worth dying for? Is the reward worth your life? Vega's smile faded. He stared down the barrel of Nitro's gun and saw something in the Apache's eyes that made him believe every word. This wasn't a bluff. This was a man who'd already decided dying was acceptable if it meant protecting his family. The most dangerous kind of opponent let her go, one of Vega's men said nervously. Boss, it ain't worth it. There's other bounties, easier ones. This Apache's crazy enough to do it. Vega's jaw clenched. His pride warred with his survival instinct. Finally, survival won. Release her, he ordered through gritted teeth. But this isn't over, Apache. We'll come back, maybe with more men, maybe with soldiers. You can't watch her every minute of every day. Eventually we'll get her. The bandits untied Josefina's wrists roughly, shoving her toward Nitro. She stumbled, caught herself, and ran to him, Shadi still clutched in her arms. Nitro's gun never wavered from Vega's head, even as Josefina pressed against his side. Leave, Nitro said. Don't come back. Next time I won't talk first. The bandits mounted up, Vega last, his face twisted with rage. You made an enemy today, Apache. A bad one. Sleep light, because we're coming back. And when we do, that woman and that baby will be ours. And you'll be dead. He spurred his horse viciously and rode off, his men following, their threats and curses fading into the distance. Nitro held his position, gun raised, until they were completely gone. Only then did he lower the weapon, his hand shaking with delayed reaction. Josefina collapsed against him, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Shadi, disturbed by the commotion, began to cry. The sound of her wails filled the destroyed camp, a baby's voice cutting through the aftermath of violence. We have to leave, Josefina gasped between sobs. We have to run. He meant it, Nitro. He'll come back with more men. He'll kill you and take us. We have to go now. Nitro wrapped his free arm around her, still scanning the horizon for any sign of return. Yes, he said quietly. We leave. Today, now. We take only what we can carry, and we go deep into the mountains where they can't follow. He looked down at her, at Shadi crying in her arms. There's an Apache camp 3 days north. We'll be safe there with my people. They'll protect us. But the reservation agents, Josefina protested. Won't they turn you in? This camp isn't on the reservation. It's a free camp, hidden. The last of us who refused to surrender. They'll welcome you. They'll help. He holstered his gun and began moving quickly, pulling supplies from the wreckage. Can you ride? Yes, Josefina said, wiping her eyes, forcing herself to think practically. I can ride. I can do whatever we need to do. They worked with desperate efficiency, salvaging what they could from the destruction. Nitro grabbed weapons, ammunition, dried meat, water skins. Josefina found her satchel, mostly intact, and filled it with necessities for Shadi, cloths for changing, a spare blanket, the carved wooden rattle Nitro had made. They collapsed the tipi, bundled it onto Nitro's horse along with the buffalo robes. Within 30 minutes they were ready. Nitro had 2 horses now. He'd caught and gentled a wild Mustang 2 weeks ago, and though it wasn't fully trained, it would carry Josefina. He helped her mount, showed her how to hold Shadi secure in the cradleboard while riding. His hands lingered on her waist, steadying her, and when she looked down at him, their eyes met. I won't let them take you, he said fiercely. Either of you. I swear it on everything sacred. You're mine to protect now. My family, my responsibility. and I don't fail my family twice. Naicho, Josefina said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I brought this on you. If I'd never come here, if I just kept walking that night, you'd be safe. Your camp wouldn't be destroyed. You wouldn't be running for your life. If you'd kept walking, Naicho said quietly, Shadi would be dead. And I would have died inside, watching her fade. You gave us both life. Whatever comes next, whatever price we pay, it was worth it. She was worth it. You're worth it. He mounted his own horse, checked their supplies one last time, and looked back at the canyon that had been their sanctuary, the place where Ayasha had died, where Shadi had been born, where Josefina had appeared like a miracle, where they'd built something precious from grief and desperation. Now they were leaving it all behind, fleeing into the unknown, hunted by men who wouldn't stop until they were caught or dead. We ride hard, Naicho said. We don't stop except to rest the horses. We travel at night when the moon is bright. We leave no trail they can follow, and we trust each other completely. Can you do that? Yes, Josefina said without hesitation. I trust you with our lives. Our lives. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Not my life and Shadi's life. Our lives. As if the three of them were one unit now, indivisible. Naicho nodded, accepting the weight of it. The responsibility, the commitment implied. They rode out of the canyon as the sun climbed toward noon. Two figures on horseback with a baby between them, heading north toward the mountains that rose purple and distant against the sky. Behind them, the Tipi poles lay scattered. The stream ran clear and uncaring. The red cliffs stood eternal and indifferent. The canyon would remain, would shelter other lives, other stories. But for Naicho and Josefina and Shadi, it was now just memory. They traveled in silence for the first few hours, alert for any sound of pursuit. But the desert remained quiet, except for the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the occasional cry from Shadi, who didn't understand why her comfortable routine had been disrupted. When the baby's fussing became insistent, they stopped briefly in the shade of a rock outcropping. Josefina dismounted awkwardly, stiff from riding, and nursed Shadi while Naicho kept watch, his hand never far from his gun. "How far to the camp?" Josefina asked, wincing as Shadi latched on hungrily. The stress of the morning had affected her milk, and it wasn't flowing as easily as usual. 3 days, if we push hard. 4, if we're careful. Naicho scanned the horizon. "We'll rest tonight in a place I know, a hidden spring. Tomorrow we climb into the high country. It's rough terrain, hard on the horses, but impossible to track us through. By the 3rd day we'll be in Apache territory. They'll be watching for us, will guide us the last part of the way. Will they accept me?" Josefina asked quietly, a Mexican woman with an Apache baby. "Won't they be suspicious?" "I'll explain," Naicho said. "They'll understand. The Apache know about loss, about survival, about doing what's necessary. They'll see that you saved Shadi, and that will be enough. You'll be family, protected." Shadi finished nursing and fell asleep, exhausted by the day's disruptions. Josefina held her close, breathing in her scent, feeling the weight of her. This child who wasn't hers by birth, but had become hers in every way that mattered. She would die before she let Vega take her. Would fight with her last breath to keep her safe. "We should marry," Josefina said suddenly, the words surprising even herself. Not because the cowboys said so, not to make it legal or proper, but because it's true. We are family. We are committed. We would die for each other, for Shadi. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Choosing someone and keeping that choice, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Naicho turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "You're sure? This isn't fear talking? Not just trying to make things official before we reach the camp?" "Man, I'm sure," Josefina said, meeting his eyes. "I've been sure for weeks, maybe longer. I just didn't want to admit it because I felt guilty, like I was betraying Carlos. But I realized something today, when Vega was going to take us. I realized that Carlos would want me to live, to love again, even if it's different. To be happy, even if it's not the happiness I had with him. And I am happy, Naicho, with you, with Shadi, with this strange, difficult, beautiful life we're building. I want to make it official. I want to call you my husband and mean it." Naicho was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed to where she sat and knelt in front of her, taking her free hand in his. "I love Ayasha still," he said quietly. "I always will, but I love you too. Differently, but no less real. You're brave and kind and strong. You saved my daughter, and in saving her, you saved me. You made me want to live again, not just survive. Made me remember what it feels like to have hope." He squeezed her hand. "Yes, Josefina. I want to marry you. Today, tomorrow, whenever you wish. Apache tradition or Mexican or both or neither. It doesn't matter. What matters is the choosing. And I choose you. I choose us." Josefina felt tears streaming down her face, but these weren't tears of fear or grief. These were different. Tears of relief, of joy, of something that felt like coming home after a long journey. "Then let's marry tonight," she said. "At the hidden spring. No priest, no witnesses, just us and the stars and Shadi and the promises we make to each other. That's enough. That's everything." "Tonight," Naicho agreed, and he leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and careful, a first kiss that tasted of salt and dust and hope. Shadi slept between them, and the desert stretched endlessly around them, and somewhere behind them, Vega and his men plotted their return. But in that moment, none of it mattered. In that moment, there was only two broken people choosing to heal together, choosing to build something new from the ruins of what they'd lost. They mounted up and rode on, heading north toward safety, toward family, toward a future they couldn't quite see but were brave enough to reach for anyway. The hidden spring emerged from the rocks like a secret the desert had kept for centuries. Clear water pooled in a natural basin surrounded by cottonwood trees, their leaves whispering in the evening breeze. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Nacho and Josefina made camp quickly, unsaddling the horses, spreading their buffalo robes beneath the largest tree. Shadi was fussy from the long ride, her small face scrunched with displeasure. Josefina nursed her while Naicho built a small fire, keeping it low so the smoke wouldn't give away their position. When Shadi finally fell asleep, Josefina laid her carefully in the cradle board and turned to Naicho. He looked up at her and held out his hand. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. She took his hand and nodded. "I am." They stood together beside the spring, the water reflecting the first stars beginning to appear overhead. Nacho spoke first in Apache, his voice low and reverent. He called upon Usen to witness their union. He promised to protect her, to provide for her, to honor her as long as breath remained in his body. He acknowledged Ayasha's memory, asking her spirit to bless this new beginning. Then Josefina spoke in Spanish, invoking the Virgin Mary and all the saints. She promised to stand beside him through whatever trials came, to be a mother to Shadi, to build a home wherever they found themselves. She honored Carlos's memory, thanking him for preparing her to recognize love when it appeared again. There was no priest, no legal document, no community to witness. There was only the desert, the spring, the stars, and a sleeping baby. But when they looked at each other in the firelight and said, "I choose you," in both Apache and Spanish, it felt more sacred than any ceremony. Naicho pulled out a bracelet made of twisted silver wire. "This was Ayasha's," he said quietly. "I think she'd want you to have it." Josefina's eyes filled with tears as he fastened it around her wrist. In return, she removed the small gold cross from her neck. "This protected me through everything," she said, placing it in his palm. "Now I want you to have it." Naicho slipped the chain over his head, tucking the cross beneath his shirt where it rested against his heart. Then he leaned down to kiss her, and they both cried, not from sadness, but from choosing joy after so much loss. 3 days later, they reached the Apache camp, hidden in a narrow valley. Apache scouts guided them safely through the treacherous mountain pass. The camp was small, maybe 30 tipis, the last holdouts refusing reservation life. The people gathered to meet them, faces cautious but curious. An old woman pushed through the crowd, and Naicho's face lit up. "Guyen," he said with deep respect. "Grandmother, we need sanctuary." The old woman looked at Josefina with sharp eyes, then at Shadi, then back at Naicho. This is the Mexican woman who saved your daughter? Ah, yes, she's my wife now. We married 3 days ago. She and Shadi are my family. Guyen stepped forward and placed her hand on Josefina's cheek, studying her face. Finally, she smiled. You have the eyes of a mother and the heart of a warrior, she said in Spanish. You are welcome here. The tension dissolved. People came forward to greet them, to admire Shadi, to offer food and shelter. Within hours, a new tipi had been erected for them. Women brought gifts, woven baskets, clay pots, soft blankets for Shadi. That night there was a celebration. They roasted meat, shared stories, sang old songs. Josefina sat beside Nacho, Shadi asleep in her lap, and felt something she hadn't felt since Carlos died. She belonged. Months passed. Seasons changed. Shadi grew from infant to toddler, taking her first steps between Nacho and Josefina's outstretched arms, while the whole camp cheered. Josefina's milk eventually dried up as Shadi learned to eat solid foods, but their bond remained as strong as ever. She called Josefina Mama, in a blend of Spanish and Apache. Nacho and Josefina's marriage deepened into genuine love, different from what they'd known before, but no less powerful. Josefina became pregnant, and when their son was born, they named him Carlos Miguel Nacho, honoring all the love and loss that had brought them to this moment. Vega never found them. The Apache camp was too well hidden. Eventually, word filtered through that he'd been killed in a raid gone wrong. The threat dissolved like smoke, but they never went back to their canyon. Their home was here now. On a bright spring morning, 5 years after that desperate night when Josefina had knocked on a stranger's tipi, she and Nacho stood together watching their children play. Shadi, now a vibrant 5-year-old, was teaching her younger brother and baby sister how to weave grass into small baskets. Do you ever regret it? Nacho asked quietly, his arm around Josefina's waist. Knocking on that tipi door? Josefina leaned into him, watching Shadi laugh. Never, she said firmly. I was walking into the desert to die, and instead I found life, found family, found you. How could I regret the best decision I ever made? Oh, I thought I'd lost everything, Nacho said. And then you appeared, and slowly, piece by piece, you helped me build something new. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their children, their future. The desert wind blew soft and warm, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in the darkest trials. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you were always meant to have. Their story wasn't about perfect romance or an easy path. It was about 2 broken people who chose to heal together, who built family from fragments, who turned grief into grace. It was about a starving baby who became the bridge between 2 wounded souls. It was about milk and mercy, about desperation and devotion. And as the sun set over the Apache camp, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, 3 children played while their parents watched. And the love born from loss continued to grow stronger with each passing moment. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. Not what either had planned, but exactly what both needed. The end of one story. The beginning of everything that mattered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.